you who are new to Tech in Motion, Tech in Motion is our events community that's all about bringing together tech professionals to discuss the most pressing IT topics of the day, and that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. Over the past few months, we've seen a surge of interest in how startups are adapting to tighter budgets, evolving talent needs, and rapid rise of AI. Tonight's panel brings together experts who have navigated these challenges in real time, from building resilient teams, scaling smart, and leveraging AI to drive impact. In just a moment, you'll hear from our panelists about how they're approaching growth, innovation, and leadership in today's tech landscape. Stay tuned until the end. We'll have an opportunity for live audience Q&A where we can answer a few questions from our audience members. Before we hand things off to our panelists, I'm excited to welcome Max from our founders at Motion Recruitment to share a few words on what he's seen in the startup scene.
Welcome to Tech in Motion. What a great turnout. This is awesome. Really glad everyone can make it out tonight. I've made a couple different rounds, but for those I didn't get a chance to meet just quite yet, I'm Max. I run our Chicago office at Motion Recruitment, the founders behind Tech in Motion. As Hannah mentioned, we've been hosting events like this for almost 10 years now, and it's our second of this year, actually. Really, the idea is to bring together founders, engineers, product leaders, and technologists to share ideas, make connections, and really just talk about what's going on in the market. As we've settled and kind of summer winds down, we're heading into the final stretch of the year. I think there's been a little bit of a surge of post-Labor Day hiring, which has been a lot of fun, and it's a great time for startups. I think we're seeing a lot of companies kind of hitting that growth mode. And so, if you're looking to scale your first team or experiment with AI, or you're really just trying to figure out what growth means in 2025 as we head into 2026, you're definitely in the right room. And if you're hiring or thinking about your next move, feel free to stop by our career booth after this or talk to a few of my team members at Motion. Tonight's panel is all about navigating the real challenges of startup growth, from aligning cross-functional teams to building resilient cultures, as Hannah mentioned, and also integrating AI and see a talk of the town AI. Our speakers have definitely faced hard challenges and found ways to scale smartly, not just quickly. I also have personally been lucky enough to work with a few of these folks, and so I can tell you firsthand you're in for a great conversation. So with that, I'll let them get into it. Please join me in welcoming our panel for tonight. We have Gregg Walrod, co-founder of Secret Sauce, Jason Tillery, co-founder of Synopsis, Macey Majkrzak, director of technical program management at Equinix, and Dave Hoover, founder at Red Squirrel Technologies.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining. So as Max mentioned, I'm Gregg. I'm super stoked to be your guys' host here tonight among these incredibly heavy hitters that have been in the Chicago scene and doing some really amazing stuff for a really long time. Just brief intro, because I'll keep it quick, because today is about these guys, not myself. As Max mentioned, I run a small consulting firm called Secret Sauce. Been doing that for a couple years now. It's basically my business partner and wife back there that we've been doing light tech product strategy for small businesses and startups. We like to be super fractional, super adaptive to companies. Prior to that, I've been in this space. You've probably, if you've been around Chicago for a while, I've been hosting events and doing this for a long time. I've been in tech about 20 years. Outside of Secret Sauce, I have a couple crazy things that are coming up that I'm really excited about. I just joined a company called Camp that does events for startups and founders. That I'm going to be doing their Chicago events over the next several months as they kind of scale. And then I just took a job as the interim CEO for a product lifestyle barbershop. It's a little out of left field. It's not exactly what you would think for somebody who has an engineering tech background, but as you maybe can see, I love hair and clothes. And when they came to me and said they want to scale fast, they're looking for somebody to do e-com, and so I just kicked off with them. So really, really excited. Before I introduce the panelists here and let them do intros, I first just want to, again, thank Max and Hannah and the Motion Recruitment team for putting this together. I mean, I'm really excited because Chicago has kind of re-insurged itself with events and getting people together. And so thank you guys for bringing us together. Thank you to the Matter team for having us here and hosting us in this awesome space. And thank you to all of you for coming here. Like, we don't get to have events like this in Chicago unless people like yourselves show up. So thank you guys for being here tonight. Before I pass it off to them, I always like to do just a quick read of the room. So how many folks in here would call themselves a founder? How many would be on, we'll say, product side? How many marketing? How many engineering? Okay, cool. Thank you. I love to do that just to start because it kind of gives us a good gauge. Oh, sorry. The most important part, sales. Awesome. So thank you. That helps us kind of get a good gauge of the room. And from here, I'm just going to let our panelists, we'll start with Jason. We'll go down the line and just let them give a little intro of themselves, and then we'll jump into the panel.
Thanks. I'm Jason. I've been in tech in Chicago for the last 20 years and have been a founder for most of that time. I had a few failed startups at the beginning and then started a company 15 years ago now called Build Out. We did SaaS for real estate. That went really well. We were able to grow that up. Had a lot of really interesting experiences. Ultimately sold it and then started the company that I'm at now called Synopsis. We do data and analytics for like mid-sized companies. There's really not a good solution for them out there. We had this problem. We spent a ton of money and ultimately decided that we would do this as our next gig. We're 6 people right now, so very early. If you're one of the engineers who raised your hands and you're super interested in a really hard tech problem, come find me.
Is this thing on? Yep. I'm Dave, Dave Hoover specifically. I've been in Chicago tech for 25 years, and it wasn't even my first career, so I'm not young. Let's see if I can quickly go through the story. But I think the one way to describe what I've been doing is developing software while developing software developers for a long time. Let's see. Yeah, I've been like kind of a early employee or like co-founder of a number of different companies over the years. First was Optiva, which eventually grew to, it's a software development company that grew at about 50 people, and then we were acquired by Groupon back in its peak, or like I should just say 2011. And then I got to co-found Dev Bootcamp and help a lot of people get into tech in 2012 and to 2016. And then I just fell down the crypto rabbit hole, which I've been in and out of over the last 10 years, which has been an interesting, wild, and weird ride at times. And honestly, right now, I'm exploring what I want to do next. I'll stop there.
Hello, I'm Macey, and I'm a Chicago native, so I've been here my whole life. I went to the high school in the suburbs that was hit by the tornado in 1990, so once they rebuilt it, I attended, if anybody knows their local lore. My career has been mostly in startups, but I did get started doing computer forensics. So you can like start anywhere, and a little bit of intellectual property theft can take you into program management. And I have been really building program management teams kind of ever since I made that transition, and then scaled that into a couple chief of staff roles, and now working at a larger data center company. But my tour of Chicago startups started at Groupon, which is where I met Dave, and that was a really fun ride. I built it was really fun. And also, like, what a Chicago name, Like, I love seeing startups founded in Chicago succeeding in Chicago, no matter where they land in the end. And so, that was a really cool scale experience, and did a couple small ad tech, fintech startups after that. Went into DigitalOcean, which was cloud, and my second IPO, and then just rounded a tour at Chime Financial, which is a Chicago success story as well. They have an office here, and they just IPO'd in June. So that was a really awesome ride, and I was leading engineering coding with AI adoption in my role as chief of staff for the CTO. So yeah, I am hiring as well for program management, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about that too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Like I shared, I'm super excited because we have some really heavy hitters in the Chicago market here today. And, I should give Macey an extra shout out. Joined last minute. We had a panelist that had a family emergency that needed to drop off, which happens. And Dave introduced us to Macey. We were on a call with Macey, I think by 11:30 this morning, and getting things going. So just extra shout out for kind of jumping in at last minute, and Dave for the intro as well. Really appreciate that. And so I think as we're going in, it's interesting. I think my notes knew we were going to be in this direction, so I'm going to start in the other direction. Macey, when we were talking earlier, and just for context for folks, we're going to kind of start with like fit and scale and kind of operationally. And so, Macey, when we were talking earlier, you talked a lot about some of the big transformations that you've seen at DigitalOcean, that you've seen at Chime, and what's like a big lesson that you've learned that you could share with the team as you're trying to get people to align on strategy and execution, and even more in particular with AI? You even mentioned earlier you have your new venture that you just started, which is a little bit of a pivot from Chime, because maybe the adoption and things like that is a little bit longer because it's an older organization. So I'd love to kind of just start there, and then Dave and Jason, if you have things to weigh on, and we'll just kind of keep going.
Yeah, I think that something really landed with our engineering team when we were starting AI adoption is like this concept of curiosity, and really approaching these tools with a curiosity of what can it do and how can I use this. And so it allows you to be open, and really like you are learning a brand new tool and you're learning to do things in a different way, where when before you were just doing all this work yourself, and now you're trying to teach this tool how to do it for you in a way that you wanted it, in the way that you want it to do it. And so really like approaching that change with a sense of curiosity around, you have the power to define your destiny here, and maybe it'll go well and maybe sometimes it won't. But realizing with the curiosity that whenever you're trying something, you're learning. And so I had some developers, coming to me like, oh, that, using it on this failed. And it's like, I'm not sure that's the right word, because you learned a lot about it. And so in these organizations full of, different levels of adoption and different levels of openness to adoption, really focusing on that like innate sense of human curiosity allows people to like level the playing field a little bit and approach it as that they're, everyone's learning for the first time. And I think what I was like saying to you is, change is the only constant, right? Like we all use email, we don't send letters, and the only promise is that there will be more change. So if you can navigate it and you can learn how to make it work for you, then you'll always stay relevant and you'll always stay in a position where you're in control of that destiny. And so I guess those were like a couple of the things that really helped us as we were approaching, adopting this tool and figuring out where we wanted it to be across the organization. And I think no matter the maturity of, companies that have been around a while, companies that are newer, if you can really like take the legacy fear or, obstacles and just like bring everybody back to that innate like human sense of curiosity, then I think we've had a lot more success than, mandating or saying it has to be done in this way. It's like, let's figure it out together. Some of that. So what do you think, Dave?
Yeah, so I'm curious. Like, I think you were talking about Chime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly.
Okay.
I've only been at Equinix 2 weeks, so.
Yeah. That's really cool to hear, because I would think, how big is Chime actually? Can you give us a
Like
sense?
1,500 now.
Okay.
People.
Because I would think, I would assume that they would have be a little bit more like, I don't know, either forbidding or prescribing. at that scale what to use. So because like in my last role, we were adopting AI tooling for engineers, and it was like a team of like 12 engineers. So you could just be truly curious and bottom up with the way it's being adopted, as opposed to like, in my head, I'm thinking of like large companies that are just like, you shall use AI and you shall use this tool. But that's not how it was.
With our early adopters, there was definitely like, tell me why you want this tool and we can see what we can make happen. Like, I don't think it was not a blanket yes for everybody, but certainly, especially, Chime was one of the earlier GPT, like OpenAI enterprise cases. So they started with new tools, and it's much more of a, we can't have everything within reason, but I think very similarly in that most companies don't require developers to use the same IDE, right? Like some people like JetBrains, some people like VMware, some people like, VS Code, whatever. And I think we think of this similar fashion with AI in that for certain use cases, different tools are going to be better. So I think it was less about, I think that it was in more of an expansion mode, especially as I was getting the team adjusted to starting to adopt these tools. But that doesn't last forever, right? So there is a reining mode too, as you start to really like get more deep in the tools, and especially as your cost profile changes, because you go from just like paying for seats to paying for your usage, and your users become more mature in that they're not just sending basic requests, they're actually establishing real usage fees. And that was when we had to be more specific about how we're going to invest across the tool set. But that is also a big indicator of maturity of adoption, because it took us a while to get to higher cost usage fees. And that is also when we started seeing more of the value of, we're seeing more unicorn use cases of a migration that was supposed to take 2 months down to 2 weeks, or this like really tedious testing task we're able to do more quickly and more easily with AI, because we'll do it for you in a lot of ways. So we were also able to really start to see what was producing more value and then invest in the areas and the tools and sort of drop some of the ones that weren't producing that value. So a lot of Cursor, a lot of Claude Code, a lot of, Codex was just released not that long ago, and so we'll see where it goes. But
it hadn't like standardized. You were still using multiple different tools across engineering.
I personally don't think it would ever standardize on only one. Yeah. Just the same.
Because people use different tools like IDEs and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Like my Go developers just really wanted to use JetBrains AI. And I just don't think that there is one tool for every use case. And so if you have a technology platform or a company that has enough differentiation across the board, then you may be investing in a couple tools. I did hear of like some of the startups, telling people they get to pick. You get 5 licenses. What are your tools, right? And so there is some choice in that, and it goes into your budget and into everything else. But it is one way of reining and putting some like controls around, okay, Macey doesn't need a seat in every tool, but Macey has found this tool works for her, so I'm picking Cursor as my coding tool. And that's where I'm going to invest more. So yeah, but there is, and I think Chime is definitely in the startup realm compared to where I am right now in terms of curiosity and appetite for more of that. But I think, I think the businesses are really different. Obviously, data centers are a really different animal in terms of how they can move when you're dealing with a lot of hardware versus an exclusively software company that is all in the cloud and doesn't have some of those barriers. So it just depends on your product, and it depends on your staff and budget, I guess.
Budget,
just that
for sure.
little thing.
I definitely like the choose your kind of own adventure, though. I hadn't heard that yet. That's a big takeaway for me, is you get X amount of licenses, choose this, choose what you want to go with. Jason or Dave, anything you guys would want to add before we move?
Sure. The one thing that's weird for me about this, other than that you just talk to your computer now, which is really weird, is that you have to adjust so quickly. I mean, the coding tool that works really well for you today, you can pretty much guarantee it's not going to be the most effective thing for you in a month or 2 months. And I think what the most important thing to build into the way you work is that you have to keep trying things and you have to keep retrying things. And that goes both for the coding tools and the way you use AI in your software. I mean, I can tell you, for instance, we have a really critical part of our platform that we built with the intention that AI would perform some of the functionality. And we built sort of all the scaffolding and put the AI in and ran it. And that was at the beginning of the year. And it just didn't really work. Like 65% of the time it would be correct, which is useless. And then we'd try it every time a new model came out, and it continued to just be useless. And then one day a new model came out and it hit like 99.9%, and suddenly it was part of the product. And that's really weird because it used to be you'd do an experiment, and if it worked, great, and it's part of your business now. And if it failed, you learned something, but you threw it in the garbage. Now everything you do, you have to put it on the shelf if it doesn't work and retry it over and over and over again. It's just a different way to think about these things, and it's been very weird.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I think just how rapidly technology changes these days. And I mean, the differences in the models, even a few months later, you hit the nail on the head there, just in the sense of like, I'm working with a client currently, and the data output that we saw 3 months ago when we launched to what we're now seeing being able to hit GPT-5 versus when we were hitting 4.0 it's just crazy. Because at first you're like, I don't know. And then as things change, and I think that's a really good nugget for everybody to think on as well, is the technology is growing so fast. It is no longer, like you said, you'd throw something to the shed and say, it's it. You have to continue to keep hitting it and pushing it and seeing what happens, because that technology is adapting so fast. I think, go ahead,
I
Dave.
was just going to say, I think there's like two different axes of like, there's the established models that are just gradually getting better, or quickly getting better, or suddenly, I guess in your case, getting better. And then there's the like, I would say like bottom up, curiosity driven, like go find the next tool that Macey was talking about, in terms of like, if you can let your frontline people discover the tools instead of like somebody up in the ivory tower telling them what to do, you're going to end up with better tools, because like there's no way to keep up with it unless you listen to your engineers or your product people or your designers.
I think what I'm thinking of a segue here, just to kind of keep us moving, is, Jason, I'm going to change this question just a little bit, but so as you were early on, founding Build Out and now Synopsis, and you're thinking about product market fit, and you just shared the adaptation of tools and how technology's changed, I guess, how has your understanding of things kind of shifted as you've scaled? And is there more you want to maybe dive into deeper with how you just shared that nugget of it was like 65%, now 99%, like, maybe even looking at the differences between Build Out and now Synopsis, like how has all of this changed as you're looking at your product market fit and how quickly things can adapt?
Sure. I mean, I think as best as I can tell, the nature of product market fit hasn't really changed all that much as a result of AI. You kind of know when you have it. I haven't ever heard a really good definition of product market fit, or a good, checklist that you could run down to say, yep, we have it. But there are certain signs, things like people renew at the end of their subscription. If they don't, and they regularly aren't, well, then you really don't have product market fit. If they always do, well, then you must have it. If you're in the middle of a demo and someone stops you and asks you how they buy it, you probably have product market fit. These are, it sounds obvious, but there's not a lot more than those kinds of signals to go on. And I think one of the hard things is there's not really a good, at least as best as I can tell, there's not really a good plan you can follow to land there. I think the best thing that I've ever seen someone do is stay very close to their customer, try to understand them really, really well, and then try as many things as possible. Like the reason that startups make all the products and then the companies that have been successful make a lot of software, but it never has product market fit is because it's just very hard to try a lot of things. Like the bigger your company gets, the more hurdles there are going to be. And it's very hard if you work somewhere, even with 50 people, to just go off on your own and never talk to your boss and try a bunch of stuff and start calling your customers and decide what you're going to deploy to them. And you just can't do all that stuff. So you just don't get very many shots on goal. And so you're probably not going to hit product market fit. And, you know, a lot of people in here have worked in tech. And a lot of people in here have been part of companies that have had a successful product. Probably not that many people in here have been part of companies that had a successful product and then launched another independently built successful product that wasn't like some upsell to an existing product that already had people locked in. It's just very hard to do. Usually you grow by buying other companies, and that's the reason why. It's very hard to reproduce. I don't think AI changes it much, except for the fact that you now should get more shots on goal. You can go faster, move faster. You know, it might be tempting to just over polish things because you can go so fast now, but I think it makes more sense to just take more shots and iterate as fast as your customer will tolerate your demos.
One thing I'll just say real quick is if somebody stops you in your demo and asks you if you can buy, stop the demo.
Yes.
Just quick pro tip. Yeah.
Right there. Like, this is the cost.
Yeah.
Here it is.
I think it's an interesting point about more shots on goal with AI. I think that's a good. It's an interesting takeaway of just accelerating the iterative cycle.
Yeah, and your prototypes look so much better than they did before, and you can take them to prod. Sometimes.
I can't imagine being a VC these days with the pitches that they're getting in the like proof of concepts that they're getting. This has got to be wild.
Yeah, what you're able to build now in just a few days at sometimes versus what when we were leading engineering teams 10, 15 years ago, what it took us to get an output that our leaders were like, yeah, I'm really excited about this. You're talking like 6 months to build an app that maybe they were excited about and still they weren't happy about where a button or icon was. And now with the tools that we have, you're talking like you can spend a weekend and spin something up, you know, with the tools that are out there. And you have companies like Bubble that just recently released their mobile, straight to mobile dev. And there's just so many things that are changing in the space, which is just crazy. Dave, you know, you shared some of your experience earlier. I've known you for a while. You've gotten to build consulting firms and a bunch of different startups and boot camp. And I guess, you know, if we're thinking about operations and scaling, like what's one thing or a few things you would share with the group of like maybe where you'd shift? And I guess since we're really heavy into AI, I'd love to kind of know what's something that you've learned now that you're like, man, if I, like we were just talking about, if I had this tool 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a year ago, like what's something maybe you've seen in current space that you're like, man, if I had this when I was at Groupon or Dev Boot Camp, it would have just changed the game.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of scaling, I mean, I think about hiring right now more than like technical scaling. And I think you asked like what was one thing I would change or maybe do differently?
Yeah, one thing you'd change or maybe do differently. You've had an opportunity to build so many teams and like you said, you've gifted us a lot of incredible engineers over the years through Dev Boot Camp as well. So
yeah, so I think it was really the first time I ever got to be in a leadership role at this little consultancy called Aptiva that existed long ago. And at the time, I was really passionate about apprenticeship and bringing people on from like non-traditional backgrounds. I'm a self-taught engineer, so I kind of had a bias towards that. And we brought in this brilliant apprentice to our little humble office in Wheaton, Illinois, before we moved into the city. And he was fantastic and just blew our minds with how quickly he learned. And and how quickly he got up to speed and started making an impact just within like weeks and a couple months of joining the company. And we were like, all right, well, this is great. Let's get like 5 more of these people. And we just quit. I mean, it wasn't literally 5, but it was like way too many all at once. And we just kind of got out over our skis with like, that's when I learned about like how to balance like junior to senior ratio, which is very common sense sort of stuff. I feel like in general, but that was a mistake that I made. It was just kind of getting too excited about something that I was personally passionate about. And it really set us back a little bit. We eventually righted the ship and got the right ratio in place and the right mentorship in place, but that one hurt us a little bit. Definitely something I've done differently ever since. I mean, taking it all the way to now, like, geez, 20 years later, you know, as someone who's spent a lot of my career thinking about people who are just starting their career, whether it was an apprenticeship program or dev boot camp and helping people get jobs afterwards. I think about this all the time right now when like the junior talent market is changing radically. It feels to me, like my sense is that it is when we went from like the only reason boot camps initially existed was because there was just an absolute shortage of talent. And I think we are going through a weird time right now, and I do think it'll be temporary in terms of we're not feeling that scarcity for talent at the moment. And I think there's a lot of different factors playing into that, and one of those factors is AI and the sense that we can get a lot more done, and the truth that we can get a lot more done with these tools than we could before. But I do think so. I like. If like Dev Bootcamp would not exist, would not be able to launch now in 2025 the way that it did in 2012. The market's just different. It was a function. Its existence was a function of a very, very hot talent market. I mean, I love the bootcamp model. I love like immersive learning, but the kind of business aspect of it is just it would be just wildly tougher. And I know it is because I've talked to some bootcamp founders recently, that, yeah, it would just be much harder these days, partially because of AI, partially because of other economic factors. That said, I do think the talent market will eventually come back the way that it used to be. Because my experience in like 2005 to 2010 was watching Ruby on Rails kind of blow up a lot of the, conventional thinking in obviously web frameworks, but more importantly in like how to start a business online. And that let us get a lot of stuff done. I can hear you chuckling about that. Yeah, we could get a lot done with fewer people, but it didn't. But we ultimately ended up with more teams, and big unicorn businesses like Groupon that was built on Rails. And so I think about that all the time because I do think eventually we will have. We'll need a lot of software engineers because we're going to have a lot more businesses because of AI. Okay.
I think on the scale front, so becoming a public company is a level of scale increase that I've been lucky to get to work in a few times, but the scale is it's intense. And so when I think about scaling in your question, Greg, and I think about like, what is it that helps you scale to really like see the hockey stick is not thinking, a good TPM builds themselves out of a job. They do the job, they get the job running, they get the program running, and they do it in a way that automates and gets everybody talking together without them. And so when I think about really big scale and really good scaling motions, it's like generally it's not a human, in tech in that space. It's scaling, but not, taking that human and putting them in a different place, but not like forcing them to be the blocker. So when we went public, you have to be compliant and you need to make sure all your tests are passing and you're getting green builds and you can document it for auditors. And if you had to have a human doing all of that, you would not be able to continue adding dev teams. You would be blocked. So really thinking about that scale in a way that's like, just because I don't have to be involved, it doesn't mean my role's not important. And I think with AI, it's a totally different mindset in that you're not doing the work in the same way you were doing it before, but you're still really important to the work being delivered. And so you might not be writing the first pass of code, you're telling it how to be written. Now, that's a very different feeling for a lot of people. For me as a mom, it's like my everyday. Get your shoes on. Here's your list for school in the morning. But I'm giving that to a computer now and saying, write my code in this way that aligns with these principles that my organization has laid out. And then your role has changed and in a different place. But you want to make sure that you can scale it in that you can, kick off maybe 3 tickets at once and then scale them and kick them off in a way where you get to do the reviews staggered and they're ready for you. And so, I just think about it. It's not always that your job is going to be the same when you scale, but it's still going to be really important that you're there and that you set it up in a way that's like really reliable and traceable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gail.
Jason, anything? No?
No.
No. So I think what I'm excited about here is actually our next section is really diving into talent. I think we've started to lead into that. And so Jason, you mentioned your hiring. Macey, you also mentioned your hiring as well. I guess, Jason, as you're now building out engineering teams now, I guess one, what signals you or has it changed of when you need to level up your team just because all the tooling and things that are out there have changed, but also like, has anything changed as you're now looking for talent in this new market? I mean, I know there's a lot that I think it's always the staple of like curiosity and things like that when it comes to a developer, but is there anything that's kind of changed as you're now going out there and building teams in this kind of new tool set, AI and things like that have kind of shifted the market over the last handful of years?
Yeah, definitely. Software development is not the same job that it was a year ago. It's just a different thing now. And, I wasn't there at the beginning, but software development started as a much different job. You used to have to really be meticulous because you only got to run your code once a day and you had to punch it on cards. And it was just a very different job. And then it's gone through many such paradigm shifts. And the thing about different jobs is they select for different characteristics in employees. Like you could, go look at your sales team and then go look at your dev team. They're not the same sorts of people. And it's because the jobs are very different. And today, the job of being a software developer is just not the same as it was a year ago. And so it's selecting for different skills and different characteristics in people. And one of the things about going faster and reducing the barrier of entry to writing software is it is starting to combine roles that used to be distinct roles. And we've seen this before too. I mean, 20 years ago, you had people who did your database migrations and wrote the queries. That seems insane today. Likewise, we're merging roles that have been distinct for my whole career. So, you brought up how you are doing prototypes and showing them to people and it takes a few days. I mean, part of the reason that that's possible is when you ask something like Claude Code to write a feature for you, it's doing a lot of stuff that you just wouldn't have done as a developer before. Like it's not just coding with best practices from like an algorithmic standpoint. It's putting together a UI that looks better than what you probably would have done if you're not also just by some random chance a good designer, which is very, very rare. Now, every developer is some sort of designer because their code comes out looking fantastic. The consequence that I see of this is that there is just no longer room in now and in the future to have distinct roles for design, product, and development. You're basically the same person now if you're going to be effective. You never want to have different people doing a job, and it doesn't matter if it's construction or software development or anything. It's always better to have everything in one person's head. As soon as you separate a job, you've created a 3-legged race where not only do you have to do all that same amount of work, but you have a coordination problem. And with 2 people, there's one relationship that has to be dragged along through the job. If you have 3 people, there's 3 relationships, and 4 people, it's combinatorial. It's much better if one person can do everything, and now they can. And I think what you're seeing now and in the future is that great product leaders are going to be writing code, and developers who were great developers aren't going to be anymore if they don't care about the customer and their problems. And a great designer, I mean, I know some of these people, like they maybe had interest in these spaces before, but now it's just becoming required because their peers of theirs who are sort of making this leap are just building a lot more value for their companies. So I'm looking for that. Like I'm hiring software developers, but I need them to care about the UX of what they're building. I need them to care about the customer. I need them to understand the problem deeply enough to fully solve it. And in a way, it broadens the pool of people that you might hire to do these jobs. But in a way, it also probably rules out people who used to be really good at it. That's just what I think. I don't know.
That was really good. No, I had a much less mature answer. I feel like it's just in the sense, I feel like it's interesting you mentioned a year. I mean, because that's my experience as well. I mean, I think some of these tools have obviously been out for more than a year, but like I've really noticed a difference in the last year of like watching the engineers I was most recently leading and managing. There was some that were naturally just going to just push the envelope really fast and really hard and adopt these tools with a lot of interest and excitement. And those are the kinds of people I'd be looking for. And I really appreciated them because they would pull their colleagues along as well. So just people who are like, picking up the new stuff and running with it. Obviously, they can't just be like spending all day doing research necessarily. They got to get some stuff done and use the tools that they've adopted. But I think, yeah. I mean, just like when some new thing comes along that is actually useful as opposed to just hypey, the people that pick it up quickly and effectively are going to differentiate themselves. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about them being all the same. I agree it's going to merge a whole lot more. I think that the interesting thing that they talk a lot about at Chime is like taste, right? So since we have so much more stuff, picking what is good is also a skill set that is going to be really important. And so how do you know that, you see 10, I mean, poor VCs, right? Like they see 10 of these in one day. You have to have a good picker to know which one your customer is going to relate to the most. And so that's where it's like, yeah, it is a special unicorn who can do all of those things and also select what wins and what is best, and who has that taste will win.
I just want to echo or chime what you said earlier, Jason. Sorry, I wanted to say chime, but it was too much, but I did it anyway. No, just echo. I've been thinking about like technical product leaders and like how this just must be an awesome time to have fewer people to ask to do things and maybe not have anyone to ask to do anything, at least for a while. You said, like now one person can do it all. Obviously, for a little while, they can do it all. Just to pick an argument.
That's
so
right.
You're wrong about that.
You can't, as it stands today, you shouldn't have a mature software organization with just one role called like maker or something. That would probably yield really bad results because you can't have, just your best UX designer decided to learn how to do the other roles and now you've got something ready to put in production for like 10,000 users or it won't work. And likewise, you don't want your best dev like figuring out what the users need and getting on the phone with them. It's just not the way it works, but we are heading in the direction. Yeah. And it is really interesting to see.
I have a question for both of you, just to take over moderation for a second. I mean, just going back in time.
Easy, man. It's all good.
Take a drink. It's cool. Well, I'm just going back in time again to like, Jason, you mentioned like barriers coming down for people writing software, and that that's the story of my career because I tried to become a software engineer as a kid and couldn't do it until the languages got easy enough for me to get over the hurdle. And then I watched it happen again, like I said before, when Rails came out, and a bunch of people who were kind of technical, product-y people, business-y people, suddenly started shipping software, barely knowing what they were doing, but they did it. And then inevitably they'd hire software engineers to come and rescue them. because they'd kind of made a mess, but a profitable mess, or at least mess enough to get funding. I'm just curious what you two think about whether that's going to happen again. Like in terms of making a mess, but a profitable mess.
Oh, I think there'll be bigger messes. Like, I think a security vulnerability mess is a bigger mess than, for people who don't know what they're doing, and you're getting customer data and perhaps you missed a vulnerability or something like that. So I think that scares me the most in terms of people of like the new startup. But yes, I do. I listen to this podcast and they're talking about the one-person billion-dollar company and whether or not it'll happen or when it'll happen. Maybe it's sitting here in this room, I hope. From Chicago, definitely. And I think that we're going to see things we haven't really seen because of these tools. But I do think that there is like a level of expertise when you're shipping software and when you're putting things out into the world that if you're not, there are nefarious characters, and that's like a really easy miss.
Yeah. On a side note, I feel like Taylor Swift is a one-person billion-dollar company. Like when I heard that, I thought.
I don't know
I
if
did
you've
not
seen
know.
her
I did
too.
not think you were going to go there.
Anyway.
I don't know if you've seen Big Red, the chick always standing next to her.
Oh. Yeah, I'm sure there's thousands of people working for her, but
Swiftie.
I know like one challenge of that is the cleanup. I mean, so when I was doing most of the development work at Build Out when we started, and I remember sort of coming to terms with the fact that I was going to have to do a really shitty job for us to be successful because we had to build so much and had to go really fast. And most of my career I'd spent trying to engineer things properly. But I knew that wasn't going to work. So I built a lot of things looking back, thinking like, oh, this is terrible. Who's going to ever fix this? And then eventually we had a big engineering team, and I like watched and regularly apologized as people cleaned up this mess.
Said every founder.
Yes. And now, like, I'm going through the same thing again, and we're early, and we have a few developers, and I'm going really fast. But this time I'm kind of looking at it like, is it even worth it? Like, is it even worth worrying about cleaning it up? Are we going to get to a place where AI just cleans it up for us? In which case, you can kind of just default on all your tech debt later and know that someone's going to bail you out. I don't know. That's certainly not advice. But it is possible that, like, looking back, the rational thing to do would have been to be even more reckless, not with security, obviously. That you don't want to ruin your company because of a data leak, but it's possible. I don't know. I think that could change the nature of it a little bit.
No, and I think you guys hit on a bunch of good points, and I would definitely say, as somebody myself who kind of picked up coding as I was at Nerdery and was doing front end engineering as I was learning how to build up the team and all of that when I started here, I think now what the tools do, I mean, I can tell you in our startup, like what it has done for us to build things really quick for companies. It's incredibly dangerous when you're able to talk to customers, you have a little bit of design knowledge, not would call yourself a designer, but then you're able to do kind of front end. And then now what you're able to do where you have tools like Bubble, or even, a big database that I love using is called Superbase that has AI tools built in that are also coaching you, that are sending you error reports and saying, hey, like you did something over here and you might want to fix it. And by the way, we can just fix it for you. And you can talk to it just like any other AI tool. I think it's really, really crazy where things have just adapted over the last several months. And I love your guys' perspective on just talking through like how that is going to change your skill set of what you're looking for in people. But I think for me, the thing that's changed, that's always been true, is as long as you're curious and you're driven, you're gonna get a long way, which I think is something that I heard you guys all say, is as long as you hire people that are like, yeah, I'm just gonna go figure it out and research it and jump into it. And I think it's an incredible time, and thank you guys for diving into that. I want to keep us on track, and I want to get to some questions from the crowd here, but some things I'd love to kind of just wrap with. Dave, you were mentioning earlier, talking with boot camps and things like that recently, and we've been talking a lot about talent and all of that. I'd love to just kind of dive into that. You said you're talking with people that are out there training the next level of engineers, and I'd love to, if people have shared where people should be focusing or kind of their roadblocks. I think for all of us that are usually out there hiring engineers, I'd love to hear, any perspective you can add on that, having coming from that space, and then it sounds like you've recently talked with folks that are dealing with some of the struggles right now as these tools are adapting really fast.
Yeah, I can go in a couple different directions there. I mean, first, like I said, and I think people kind of can either feel or see, like it's not a great time to be running a software boot camp, just because the talent market isn't super hot, like it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, even 4 years ago. But that said, I mean, obviously, we still need people coming into the space. I was just talking to my former business partner, Kevin Taylor, who ran Optiva, and he's now a professor. And we were talking about some other stuff, and then at the end of the call, he's like, "Can I get your take on like how we should be teaching AI at the university level?" And this just came up from you, Greg. Just because I feel like he's teaching college students, and I didn't really have like a pat answer for it, but I kind of explored it with him for a second, and I was like, I don't think it makes any sense to teach AI tooling right now. It's not. I mean, it's like it changes constantly. I think it's more interesting and helpful to teach how to think about using AI, because obviously there's all sorts of news stories about hallucinations and like people like getting themselves into some serious trouble, like with mental health and other things when it comes to AI. So there's certainly ways of using it incorrectly, and it's not that the tools are bad, in my opinion. They just are what they are. You have to understand they hallucinate, and we just heard in the news, I think just this week, there's no way of stopping LLMs from hallucinating. I saw a prompt, like a big complicated prompt a month or so ago from somebody that told it not to hallucinate. And I was just like, "Oh, you can do that? That's cool." Like, no, you can't do that. But anyway, I just think that, I think the most tangible and like, it might only last for a couple years before LLMs become, replaced by something else. But like for the next couple years, I think learning how to use LLMs, whether you're using one or the other, doesn't matter. But like thinking about just the techniques that work and like understanding where their limitations are. I think that's, if you're coming up, at the beginning of your career, you're about to start your career, or you're hiring people at the beginning of their career, that's what I think you should be looking for. And those people will probably help the people that are hiring them to some extent figure this stuff out, because they're going to have the neuroplasticity to pick this stuff up so fast, which is why I love working with people at the beginning of their careers. Anyway, that was some thoughts. Where else should I go?
I think you definitely spoke on something that I think we've kind of danced around a little bit, which is there's never not going to be a human in the middle at some point, no matter how much technology adapts. And I think what you're sharing right now is you have to hire people that are willing to learn, willing to be creative, that are going to adapt. You can't really right now hire them for a specific tool almost at this point with some of the different things that are out there. You just need to hire people that are going to go out and figure the problems out. I think, Jason, we were talking briefly earlier before this of just, we were talking about a former engineer of mine that worked on your team. And to me, I feel like any engineer that, whether you want to work in product or not, if you can survive being an engineer in a consulting firm for a handful of years, you're going to come out of that with so much of these skills that we're talking about, of just like being able to lean in, learn something new, adapt on the fly. And I think that's what I heard a lot of you guys talk about is really just hiring people that kind of have that consulting engineer mindset, but on the product side now, because you're no longer saying, go be the back-end engineer and you're going to write some microservices for us and make sure things are moving smoothly there. You're now saying, hey, there's all these other tools and we need you to start thinking beyond just what's happening back there. And I think that goes to me back when I was hiring engineers and consulting. I would literally look at them and say, do you like to learn a lot and do different things and meet a lot of new people and be flying by the seat of your pants a lot? Or do you need a lot of structure and process and things like that in place? Because if you need the latter, this is not where you want to be. And I feel like almost the whole industry, maybe as we've been talking, is shifting towards what we probably all were looking in consulting engineers several years ago.
Yeah, I think to Jason's earlier point, I think we're shifting towards generalists. We're gonna always need specialists forever and ever. We need people that write an assembly, and work all the way up and down the stack and understand databases backwards and forwards. But like the general technical population are going to become more and more generalists, including like cross-disciplinary. Instead of cross-disciplinary teams, more and more cross-disciplinary people.
I also think something that you have said that I keep hearing from you is like Dev Bootcamp was created because there was a need in the hiring market. And I think with all these tools and with all these things, the reason you're doing it and your market is never more important. I mean, who is going to consume your product and is there a real need for it in the market is just like ever more important for you to nail and focus on, because they're going to have so many different options. And if you don't know what you're going after or why you're going after it, it doesn't matter how pretty or cool your tool is, it's not going to sell. So I think that is like a resounding thing that I just continue hearing from you. And I know we're in a room full of founders, so keep it in mind.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this briefly, maybe earlier in our conversation or maybe out there, kind of blurs together. But if you're going for funding these days and you don't have data and revenue, like that's like, it's out the door. Like 10, 15 years ago, we could go pitch to people and say, I made magic, and they would just give you money because nobody else knew any better. But now, there's this whole thing where, I'm millennial, you're now selling to people or pitching to people that, right, wrong, or indifferent, believe they know a lot more about technology, likely do know a lot more about technology than you were pitching 15 years ago. And technology has moved so fast. If you're not going into that room asking for funding and having data and finance and revenue behind it, you're just not going to get what you got 10, 15 years ago. I mean, even 5 years ago, what you could get. Because AI was a mystery a few years ago and you could get a lot of money. And now if you're coming in and you don't have a lot of that in place, it's hard. I've sat in those rooms, and if you don't have data and revenue to back yourself up, even if it's you sold a $50 subscription to 10 people, that at least is telling you, like we talked about earlier, somebody's willing to buy it. Somebody stopped in the room and said, how do I buy it? And so it's definitely where we're at has changed a lot. I would love to keep talking with you guys. There's questions I've had to skip over just to keep us moving, but in respect of, again, like I mentioned earlier, we don't get to have these rooms if you all aren't here. And so I'd love to just have you guys all think about it. If you have questions for this group, we have a couple folks that are running mics. As you all are thinking your question, I'd love to kind of just get a feel for the room. How many people are using AI in their business and feel really confident about it? How many people are using AI in their business and are maybe a little suspect or kind of worried about where it's going or where it could lead the business? Okay, cool. And so with that, I see Max there, and there's a couple other mic runners back there, and so just wait for them to come over. And I think we already got somebody here that's willing to jump right in and kick us off.
All right, so when we ask questions, please make sure you keep the microphone close to you. We want to make sure our videographers catch your question for later. Thanks.
Hey, question for the panel here. So from an engineering perspective, one of the challenges is as these models evolve, there's a certain level of unreliability in the models. And so I want to ask, how do you, bottom up, how do we communicate that from an engineering organization up to leadership to say, hey, if we're going to want to maintain quality, if we want to continue improving, we have to invest like more budget into the models that we're using.
With data. Like, I think that when I think about, like, you know, models changing and getting different results, I think about making the models, check the models, right? Like continuous testing. And so you can see the difference in the performance. And then, you know, you have data to show why one model is so much better than another. But potentially these actual coders have more.
I mean, I think that you may be running into more of like a leadership problem than a technical problem because you're describing the situation as it is. I'm on a couple boards of SaaS companies, and I can tell you the pressure that's being put on leaders is from their boards and investors is really incredible. Like the pressure to use AI to drive faster product development and also just reduce costs, like driving EBITDA. It's really, really incredible. And it's also very vague. The directives are like, do you have the AI, check. And it's very hard to meet that demand. And so I think maybe you need to look at it from that direction if possible. Like if you see what they're looking for, they need something to prove that they've done the work to have the AI. So give them proof of that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the fact that the models are not super reliable, they have inaccuracies, that's just true. So you have to use the tools as they are and keep an eye on them as they get better and evolve.
Just a question for you though. Like, do you still have the mic, or is it gone? Just real quick, I'm just curious. Like, is it more about, like skepticism from above in the organization, or is it just like, how do we get over the fact that the tooling has limitations? Is it just like a perception issue? Like, I'm just curious what the root of the question is.
Yes, I think at the moment, I think it might be a perception issue because on the code side, we're trying to build a lot of infrastructure around the model to kind of keep it within its parameters and keep it acting on parity with what users are already expecting. But the problem is like that I'm trying to arise in my leadership and trying to find a better way to communicate it is like, hey, I think we're tapping the limit of like how much we can control on our end. And now like we need to maybe invest in the version of the model that we're using, the size of the model that we're using, the performance of the model that we're using.
Yeah.
Is your use case like tool call oriented or more like free form content generation?
It's content generation, more free form.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're kind of out of luck, to be honest. I don't think there's anything you can do today. If your use cases are more tool call oriented and more constrained in terms of the expected output, I think there are things that you can do to get much higher reliability. But yeah, it's free form, so it's
I will say our support bot checks, like there's a ton of AI checking our support bot responses, and they are able to tell you when there's a lot of degradation in models. And similarly, we had a PR, internally built PR AI review, and we would see the same thing with model degradation. But they could tell you because they were running tests on it and seeing how it was being answered. And so that always like, if you can take it back to some of those underlying, but yeah, there's some formats that are just going to be much harder to.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation. So question on like with startups and scaling, right? So as you get more money, right, you're at a point where you're like, okay, I gotta bring more engineers. I need to like, whatever I have to scale out, right? With AI, right, or typically when you look at like developer productivity, when you bring more engineers in, developer productivity usually goes down. One metric is, and of the many metrics is like PRs, right, pull requests. Typically bring more engineers in, pull requests go down because you're training those engineers. A good article just came out about Claude Code, where the engineers there actually saw productivity rise. Very uncommon, but it's because they use Claude Code to have it almost as a silent developer, right? So when we look at budget, I think you had a great comment about budgeting. How do you budget between developers and AI tools, right? Like finding, sometimes you can have 6 developers back then, but now you can use 3 solid, good engineers with AI to probably do what 6 developers or 8 developers used to do. So how do you find that balance in a budget?
The cheaper software development gets, the more of it that people will want. I think this came up a lot like 8 months ago, whenever DeepSeek came out and they talked about Javon's paradox. It's true. I mean, if development was half the price, we'd want 3 times as much of it. So, and that's what I'm seeing too. I mean, we are going much faster, but I do want all the engineers who want to do some cool data stuff to come talk to me, because we need more. And, we expect them to get more done than they would have 2 years ago. And we spend a lot on the models too. Although you get an awful lot for not that much money.
I would agree. I didn't think that we hit the trade-off conversation just yet in terms of tooling versus developer. I think that usage-based is really has a lot of opportunity to spiral as your adoption and your company grows. Your usage-based fees, depending on what they're doing, as they're more mature with what they're doing. We hadn't had to make that decision just yet. It was definitely the paradox of, we have so many features we want to build. Let's do more of them.
Yeah, I imagine the lazy answer maybe to your question is just going back to the boards that you were talking about, Jason. They just want to spend as little as possible. So in a small context, they're just going to get away with what they can get away with and just not think about. I mean, obviously they're thinking about a budget, but they're just going to get away with as little as possible and hit their targets. But I love the answer about the cheaper software gets, the more we need software engineers. I personally love that answer just because that benefits me.
I like the answer that Jason gave of maybe one day AI is just gonna fix all of the stuff, all of our tech debt.
Yeah, that's a good gamble.
I wouldn't count on it.
It's an interesting gamble.
Hey, so I noticed something that you all touched on was speed and how AI is really helping with the speed of development, right? And so I'm also, one thing you mentioned was you could create an entire product, or at least the basic MVP for it in a weekend. So with that, I come to question for people in that position, or even working into startups, what's your take on user acquisition if speed is that quick? There's it used to be, let's say for example, if you drop a project on LinkedIn or anywhere else, it's an interesting project, right? But if the speed of being able to even just create nice UIs is crazy right now, how would founders go about acquiring users?
I just keep going back to the previous version of this scenario that I experienced 18 years ago, which was, it was kind of a combination of two things at once. It was the iPhone coming out, which made it so that everything had to look better. It just suddenly design mattered so much more, and in my little corner of the woods, this web framework Ruby on Rails came out, and suddenly there was just more time to make beautiful websites, or the design became also right around the same time more important, or just easier to spend time on. So it just feels there's no easy answer, but it just feels like it's just going to be, the standards are just going to shoot through the roof, because it's just going to be so much. It's like making something mediocre. Just the definition of mediocre will change. Just like it happened with the iPhone. It came out all the legacy or whatever kind of artifacts of cell phones before the iPhone just seems so dinosaurish within a year or whatever. And I feel like we're in that moment, and which is challenging. It's so very talented people will continue to find eyeballs and users, but the competition is going to be super hot. It's not an easy answer, but
I think part of it too comes down to, when you're talking about user acquisition, the means of acquiring users aren't all created equal. I said earlier I had a few failed startups. All 3 of those were based on the idea that we would build really great software and have a freemium model, and then people would come to us and sign up, and then we'd convert them into paid users. And it makes sense if you knew who we were. We were nerdy software developers. We didn't like to leave the room. And we figured if we built great stuff, we'd have a great company and make money. And that didn't happen at all. And what we learned, or what we sort of deliberately changed about how we went about building our companies, was we intentionally went out and found people who would buy our software. In fact, starting in 2010, we decided we're never going to build anything again unless we've already sold it. So everything for the last 15 years, we've sold before we started on, like even an empty repository. And you can sell it, and then if they demand it right away, you can say, we just made it up. That's fine too. But if you've sold it, you know somebody will buy it after you build it. And you have to sell it. Like, you have to get a commitment of money before you start building it. If somebody tells you they're going to buy it, it's not true. They have to actually give you the money. And then you know you have something. And you can go out and sell a bunch of things that don't exist really fast. You could do 10 products tomorrow. You have a good idea of what's going to work. And then you can go about that same. You also know how you can acquire customers. You just do that same thing over and over again. I don't think that really changes with AI. If anything, it might be a little better, because when people ask for things, you can be a little more confident promising things that don't exist yet.
The one thing I would add there that I talked to a lot of, because we work with a lot of early stage founders, is, maybe back, 5-10 years ago, you had 50 to 100 grand or whatever that you're funding yourself, or family or friends. Usually that's a lot of times your first investors or people close in your network. Maybe you had to spend 80% of that to build your tech back then. Now you maybe only have to spend 10 to 15% of that. I would say keep that money and spend it in customer acquisition and whatever channels it is, whether it be social media, going to events, things like that. I think that's what I get really excited about, is maybe you only can get 25 grand together, but if you're able to kind of code around and figure out bubble and things like that, maybe you build it yourself, and then you can take that 25 grand all in customer acquisition and getting your brand out there and testing and reiterating and things like that. And so I think that's what I get excited about. And I talk to founders a lot about, is take that money, but reinvest in customer acquisition and marketing and sales and getting your brand out there and getting customer feedback as much as you can.
Hey everyone. First of all, thank all four of you for sharing your insights and experiences. Love it. I've dealt with a lot of large corporations, so I think knowing that startup and then someone who's at Chime, which is like mid-tier startup, mid-tier company. What I would love to know is, like, as you're adopting AI, right? What are some of the technical challenges? Not even technical. What are challenges and issues that you're facing, and how are you mitigating them, right? I think Dave mentioned something about hallucinations, which has been a big risk. I think we also talked about adoption, which has been a big risk, right? And change management. But what are some of the things that you're seeing, because the way startups function versus corporate is completely opposite?
I mean, I don't. Most of my experience with AI is in like engineering, like software engineer tools and things like that. And I can just say, I mean, we're not in a place in an existing company that isn't just starting from scratch and maybe has like space to make some mistakes or something, like temporarily. Like in an existing company, even at a relatively small scale, you still need like very senior engineers around to keep to detect the hallucinations, I guess you could say. Obviously this happens across all LLMs, but in my specific context, the way to protect yourself from that is by having very senior people on top of it. It's helping them out, but they have to kind of basically become like project managers or team leads of like, this is the way. Like the most innovative person on my last team, I was using like Claude Code, for instance. He thought of it as a team that worked under him, and he had to manage that team, including like reviewing the code and things like that. It's just that, he was more of a conductor than an engineer. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but like that's the mindset that I bring to like thinking about how to deal with these issues. Now, if it's out in the wild, like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, an LLM is kind of being used as in a feature of your companies, that's a different beast that I'm not as familiar with. Maybe you guys are.
Model degradation. I think we talked about that a lot over here. And But yeah, I mean, code bloat is something that annoys your senior engineers. They're like, there's so much here, so much more to review. And it just changes it. I mean, they're not coding as much anyways. They are that like architectural thought leader among your team, but it adds to the mental load if they have to get through more cruft in a way to what they're doing.
Is anybody in here an expert in Terraform? Yeah? Oh, perfect.
Ooh.
Perfect. So I am not. And we have a like embarrassingly complicated infrastructure for the size of our company. And earlier this year, I decided, well, I'm going to use Terraform. I'm going to knock this thing out. How hard could it be? I know how to code. And so I leaned really heavily on AI to build all the I don't even know what the scripts are called. So but I wrote a lot of it, or at least I looked at a lot of it, ran it. Yeah, and so it was a huge mess. Anyway, it took way longer than it would have if I would have probably like read 2 books about Terraform and learned it. And then I ended up with 10,000 lines of Terraform stuff. Again, I don't know what it's called. And then had to later read enough to become like a novice and fix it. And 7,000 of those lines turned out to be unnecessary. That's just an example of how you can get yourself into trouble. But at least we can run the shit that we make up. Imagine if I was a lawyer, I would have been disbarred this year. Like this is.
It went to production.
I mean, we're at least lucky in that regard. I think when you're building your product, though, the thing that can bite you the most is that it's moving so fast. You're not building a product that you want to sell just today and that, tomorrow you don't need it anymore. You need to build a product for some period of time that you're going to have this company. So you kind of have to build, towards where it's going to be. And you have to make a lot of guesses about what the capabilities are going to be. And a lot of your guesses are going to be wrong. And if some aspect of your business hinges on a capability that you think is going to emerge in 3 or 6 or 12 months and you're wrong, your whole business may be ruined. That hasn't happened to us, but we've certainly been wrong about some of our assumptions about where things would go. And I don't know exactly how you can solve that, but it's a problem.
So I know I saw, thank you all for your questions. We could probably go on and grill everybody up here for a while. I saw some other hands go up. I do just want to time check us and be respectful of time and give you all some time to network. All of us will be, I think, hanging out afterwards, so definitely find us. But I don't know, unless you guys wanted to take more, but I was trying to just keep us cool. Awesome. So yeah, I just want to, what I like to always wrap with is, if I'd love to just go down the line and, as we've talked about a lot, but if you had to say in like 30, 60 seconds, like one little Snapple fact, like little nugget that you would give folks of like, this is what you would take going forward where things are at. I'd love to give you guys just each a quick one last statement before we wrap.
Yeah, I mean, the world's changed a lot in the last year, and it's changed in ways that are really weird and honestly unsettling to me. It's sort of, I'm a software developer and I can kind of feel my identity kind of being stripped away because the nature of what I've done my whole career, like the only thing I'm good at, has been made somewhat irrelevant and now changed, and I have to kind of learn to do something new. But it's also exciting and it creates a lot of awesome opportunities. And you're going to see a lot of things change. And I would say, it's going to change one way or the other. So you might as well embrace it, make the most of it, and build some cool stuff.
I think maybe a quick takeaway for me, just kind of something that came up for me during this conversation was I was saying like it's not the right time, or it's a bad time to have a coding boot camp. Thinking back to when it was a good time to have a good coding boot camp like 13 years ago. But then I was like, thinking about, well, those boot camps came along because of innovations in productivity and becoming a software engineer and like getting stuff done in product development. And here we are again. So I feel like we're actually potentially right before the moment when it would be good to recreate a whole nother like slew of learning programs. Who knows if there'll be boot camps or whatever, but like, I do feel like we're at, like, it's still a little bit early, but I feel like in the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to end up with a different, the landscape will settle in enough that I think we'll be able to like train up more predictably what we mean by software engineer or product developer. The name will probably change. A product developer might be it. Yeah, I feel like that's coming, and I didn't really think about that until this conversation.
I would say change is the only constant. We will always live in a world of change. You have to figure it out. And I would just also say, you know, keep the business in the forefront. If the business doesn't work, it doesn't matter how cool your tool is. It's not going to fly. So, yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry, Gregg.
No. Yeah, it's just, again, Jason, Dave, Macey, thank you guys again for taking time tonight, answering these questions, adapting on the fly. Macey, again, joining us last minute. Just really just an extra round of applause for our panelists. Like, thank you guys.
Nothing scripted.
So much. No worries. You jumped to it. You're like, let's go. Again, just want to thank Max, Hannah, the rest of the Motion team that's here running around. Thank you, Matter, again, for hosting us in this space. And then lastly, like I said in the beginning, I'm super excited, and I've always loved Chicago because of things like this. These events continue to come back more and more, so thank you all for coming. And all I can say is just keep showing up, keep pushing these types of conversations. I think that's what's moved the needle so much for Chicago over the years. So again, thank you all for coming out, and just, like I said, just keep showing up to events like this, because I think that's what makes this community what it is. So thank you all again. I really appreciate you all for coming out, and we'll be around networking.
Chi-Town.